when I was in high school, I decided what I wanted to do when I grow up. I wanted to make movies. So I went to NYU, I studied film and television production, and I graduated with honors, I might say, and a BFA in film and TV production. After graduation, I got a job as a production assistant on one independent film after another, and very quickly I was steadily employed in the feature film industry in New York City. I must have exhibited some special talent because after just a few movies, I was given a promotion to first team PA. I think that special talent was being really good at getting stepped on, because the first team are the stars of the movie. They're the actors, and I was put in charge of them, or had to deal with them, depending on how you see that. I was basically their on-set handler. Now, what everyone always asks me is, who was the most famous person you ever worked with? And I like to say that kind of depends on you. I mean, my dad was most impressed that I worked with Jenna Rowlands, who he had had a crush on since the 1980 classic Gloria. My sister was psyched when I worked with Eric Stoltz, whom she had had a crush on since Some Kind of Wonderful. My brother's crush was Jennifer Connelly, and my nerdy friends are always most impressed I worked with Frodo. Albeit before he was Frodo, I mean, I knew him when. So I can't really tell you when or who the most famous actor I ever worked with was, but I think you guys can all agree with me on who the craziest actor I ever worked with was. I'm gonna give you a hint and see if you can work this out for yourselves. It was a low-budget, made-for-TNT movie called Thicker Than Blood. It was about a boys' school in the ghetto and the tough yet warm-hearted priest who gave his all to make sure that those boys had a better future. When you hear tough yet warm-hearted priest, what actor immediately springs to mind?
De Niro.
Close. Mickey Rourke, right? Yes? Perfect casting. Now, as first team PA, I was there to make sure that the actors did their job, and that involved two things. One, making sure they knew how to do their job that day, and two, making them happy. The first part entailed giving them sides, which are the scenes we shoot that day, making sure they knew what scenes we were shooting in what order, and physically walking them to and from the set to make sure they didn't get lost. And the second part, the happy part, usually involved making sure that they had the right brand of bottled water, the right temperature cappuccino, and the perfect mix of protein to banana in their protein shakes. Oh. Although it occasionally involved a little bit more like therapy sessions. But for the most part, the worst thing that could happen is an actor would be unhappy, and then they would throw a fit, and that wasn't good. And trust me, that was a daily concern. Now, Mickey Rourke, I must say, was never mean to me, which I can't say about most of the actors I worked with. But he did make my job complicated in ways that I couldn't have imagined. For example, every day on this movie, we were in the Bronx in the same location shooting at a school. Every day for 3 weeks, his bus was parked in the same location. And every day when I had to walk him to set, he would just start wandering. And I'd be like, no, 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 today we're gonna be on set, over here, like we were yesterday, this way. Eventually we'd get there. He also made the hair guy really unhappy. Mickey wouldn't let the hair guy touch his hair, so he'd show up on site every day with his hair perfectly coiffed in a sort of Elvis do, not very priest-like, if you ask me. And you know, the director just worked with it. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part is that, you know, after you shoot one scene, they have to light for the next scene, which takes 2 hours to 5 hours. And Mickey would always go back to his bus and take a nap. Now, normally it wouldn't be a problem. I wouldn't even know that, except for the copious amounts of hair gel that he employed. So every day, when I'd walk him back to set, he would be arriving with a half mohawk. Definitely not a good look for a priest. Now, the costume department, wardrobe, really didn't have a good working relationship with Mickey either. We had a limited budget, which meant there were not unlimited costumes, and in Mickey's case, it was a priest outfit, you know, white collar, black vestment, everything. Well, at the end of the day, when Mickey was wrapped for the day, instead of going back to his bus and changing like every actor I've ever worked with has done, he would go straight to his ride and go home dressed as a priest, which wouldn't have been so bad except he never once brought his costume back. So after about 8 or so days of shooting, we were all out of priest costumes. So if you'd like to set yourself the unpleasant task of watching Thicker Than Blood, see if you can spot the scenes we shot after we ran out of priest costumes. It shouldn't be too difficult because wardrobe had declared that Mickey should just wear what he wore to set every day, which was always some variation on a blue velour sweatsuit. I do like to imagine that somewhere in Mickey Rourke's wardrobe there are still 8 priest outfits that he pulls out from time to time for the red carpet. But the craziest thing that happened was a few days before the end of production. When Mickey arrived on site, he just looked at me and said, "I am not walking," which meant he wasn't walking to set until I talked to a producer, which is a terrible moment for me. I never want to have to call the producer, but at that point there was nothing I could do. Mickey went in his bus and closed the door. I called Michael, who was the producer on the movie. He came over to the bus, he went in, and for the next 15 or 20 minutes they hashed out some deal. Michael walked off the bus and he looked 20 years older, tired and defeated, and he just said, "I need to talk to the Teamster captain." So I called the Teamster captain and I stood there and listened while a plan was hatched. There was one thing, and one thing only, that would make Mickey happy. One thing that he was demanding before he would go back to work. And even though we were in the middle of the Bronx, and this was the middle of the night, Teamsters were scattered to the 4 winds in search of this ungettable get. But those guys are great at what they do, and within an hour, one of them had called ahead and said he was on his way back, he had it. He came up to me, handed me the package. I knocked on Mickey's door. He opened it, and he was like a little boy. He was so happy he almost cried as I handed him his brand new Chihuahua. Mickey got the Chihuahua, settled on the bus, and then he walked to set, and we were able to finish the production. And that night was the first time that I had the thought that maybe, just maybe, making movies isn't so much a job for grown-ups after all.